all have to eat. But the important thing is, are our choices good for us, good for the planet, and most of all, tasty? Hello and welcome, I'm Sadhika Tiwari and you're watching Eco India. We have all been there. We grab food on the go that is cheap, convenient, and even fun. Often, nutritious and sustainably grown foods are not really our first choice. Sometimes they are more expensive and sometimes they are not easily accessible. So how can we eat healthier and grow better? The answers lie in both old traditions and new innovations. India is one of the countries most affected by the impacts of climate change. And scientists tell us that there is a direct link between climate change and people going hungry. Especially in younger children, malnutrition can have lifelong impacts, and that is a big problem for India's future. So what can be the solution, and can children become a part of the solution?
Laborers bring in the harvest by hand on the plantations of Assam. The state in northeast India is world famous for its tea. Around half of India's tea production comes from here. But the work is hard, and the laborers earn just 200 rupees a day. That's little more than €2. We are at the Kanika Senior Basic School near the city of Jorhat. Most of the children here are far too thin for their age. They are malnourished and underweight. Their parents belong to the marginalized community of the Assam tea tribes.
The tea garden workers can't give their children a proper meal. They feed them the little they have, which is not enough for growing children. They come to school with an almost empty stomach, and they also come very early.
The school dinner is usually the children's only full meal of the day. Today they are eating rice, dal, egg and lots of vegetables. The children grew the veggies themselves in their own school garden. It's quite a treasure trove, with colocasia, madhu soleng, eggplant, pumpkin, elephant apple and more. The school garden project is run by the non-profit Nourish Schools Foundation from Bengaluru. It's been working with the schools in several states for around 10 years. The foundation aims to inspire children especially to want to eat a healthy and balanced diet.
These are the formative years, both in terms of the habits that they develop then that usually stay with them for life. And the other aspect was that this is quite an important window in life, adolescence, this period broadly of 10 to 19 years in terms of physical and cognitive development too. So even short-term impact here certainly makes a difference later in life.
The children also learn through play which fruit and vegetables are healthy. Why is it important to eat a varied diet? What nutritional value do various vegetables have? Why is it better to avoid eating too many sweets? Why is cake much less healthy than a carrot?
We show a picture of the amla berry, for example, and ask the children to identify it. Then we discuss their nutritional value. In this way, they begin to understand the value of different fruits and vegetables. And that's when they realize why it's important to eat these things. And they have the opportunity to implement the knowledge they have gained in real life.
Government figures show more than 1,400,000 children in India are severely malnourished. This means they weigh far too little for their height. Their immune systems are usually weakened and they fall ill much more frequently. In Assam alone, over 36% of children are malnourished. And more than 2/3 suffer from anemia, which means their vital organs receive less oxygen from the blood. In addition, Assam is especially hard hit by the human-induced climate crisis. That is a huge problem for a state depending on farming. Floods and soil erosion are making people's lives difficult. Harvest cycles have completely shifted. Of the 25 districts in India worst affected by climate change, 15 are in Assam.
Many of the rice varieties that we used to grow, it was completely dependent on the weather pattern. Now the weather has become much more humid, much more hotter. Even during the winter, we have a very tiny short winter. Earlier we used to have a long winter. Now it has disappeared. And because of that disappearance, the food pattern, the kind of rice that we used to grow, the kind of vegetables that we used to grow, it has completely disappeared now. So huge impact on climate.
Deep Jyoti Brahma is the co-founder of the Farm to Food Foundation. For more than 15 years, the organization has been promoting sustainable agriculture among communities in northeast India. Many older varieties of vegetables can defy climate change, but there is not much market demand for them. That's because many people are no longer aware of them.
The market is now, like I said, market is deciding what to eat, and market is also influencing what to grow. So therefore, it is still being grown, it is still being, people do identify, but very few people can identify. Some of the older generation people still do identify 101 varieties of vegetables. But now these vegetables, our young people are bringing it back into their kitchen garden.
By partnering with organizations like the Nourishing Schools Foundation, Farm to Food aim to reverse the wider trend. For example, the jointly managed school gardens grow mainly older varieties of vegetables that are better adapted to the environment and therefore likely to be more resistant to the effects of climate change. And above all, the children take home what they learn here. They realize that growing their own vegetables is actually not that difficult.
The biggest impact is what our implementation partners also report is children who typically don't like vegetables. Once they start growing, they develop an interest because they have grown it themselves. They suddenly start finding them tasty. So that helps turn their behavior. It's kind of a tipping point in their lives when they move from no vegetables to, oh yeah, actually vegetables are interesting.
The children are examined regularly as part of the project. Height and weight are measured and the state of their immune system assessed. Blood tests are also taken to monitor the children's overall health. Since the organizations began their work, the number of malnourished children here in the region has fallen by 14%.
From eating healthy, let's now talk about growing better. The global agri-food system emits 1/3 of total planet warming emissions, say experts from the World Bank. Stubble burning is a major problem because it does have long-term impacts. But during the month when it is happening, it makes breathing very difficult. Scientists have come up with a solution that can make things a lot better for the farmers while polluting a lot less.
This is a brand new biochar plant, and it produces much more than that, and we will come to that in a second. Biochar is wood or any other organic material that is burned up to 700 or 800 degrees in the absence of oxygen, and that is called pyrolysis.
The heat evaporates the substances inside the biomass. They are emitted as combustible gases and bio-oil, which can be used to generate energy. And what we are left with at the end of the process is pure, stable carbon. Once the biomass starts burning, most systems can sustain themselves without using additional energy. As part of the planet's carbon cycle, plants absorb CO2 from the atmosphere and grow as biomass. But when they die, they decompose, and most of the CO2 they sucked up is released back into the atmosphere. But instead of decomposing or burning, if we turned them into biochar, we could lock half of their carbon into the soil or elsewhere for hundreds of years.
The people are more and more aware of that we need to store more and more carbon.
This is Kaspar Ziegner, the CEO of Novo Carbo. They are planning to be fully operational by the first quarter of 2024. Until then, they are optimizing their systems. The experiments with different uses of biochar kicked off over the last decade, but actually, from mount kilns to clam kilns, we have produced charcoal in many ways for thousands of years. The key is to keep oxygen out. If we can't, the biomass will continue to burn, turning to ash, and most of the carbon inside will go back into the atmosphere, which is exactly what we want to avoid. Depending on the biomass and the pyrolysis process, up to 80% of the carbon it contains can be sequestered. That is why biochar is now being presented by the industry as a good way to store carbon dioxide. But not everyone is cheering.
Going down that route in the name of carbon sequestration and carbon negative emissions will create a huge new demand for biomass.
Biofuels were once hailed as an eco-friendly source of energy, produced mainly from corn or sugarcane. But many experts say biofuels can often do more harm than good because of the way we grow them. Critics worry that we could be making the same mistake again with biochar. Deforest an area, plant fast-growing biomass, chop it down, and turn it into biochar, destroying ecosystems and biodiversity in the process. But we don't have to, because there's a huge amount of biomass we are currently wasting. According to a recent study, in India alone, 120 million tons of rice husks and other agricultural waste are burned in open pits every year. And this contributes significantly to air pollution around the country, which kills up to 2 million people per year. According to Professor Priyanka Kaushal, biochar can help.
If we convert this 120 million ton that we see into biochar, we see about roughly about 350 million tons of CO2 emission reduction if that is converted into, which is roughly about 10 to 13% of the total GHG emission that India does.
That would be a huge contribution to mitigating the climate crisis. India is currently the third highest CO2 emitter in the world, and the farmers producing biochar could use it to increase their yields or sell it for extra income. Companies like this one in Australia use excess energy to heat their greenhouses and use the biochar for growing plants. But ultimately, it depends on how we get the biomass and what we do with it. If it was transported from hundreds of kilometers away, or if the forests had to be cleared, or if it is used to replace coal burning, then it is no longer eco-friendly. More and more agricultural businesses use biochar to enhance soil quality and increase yields.
We see that in poor soils, it seems to work better than in very rich soils. And also, if you have sandy soils, you improve the water holding capacity usually.
This is Claudia Kaman. She has been researching biochar for the last 15 years.
And after about more than a decade of biochar research, we know from meta-studies, which compile a lot of knowledge from different scientific studies, that we have on average increases in yields.
Many scientists say they do not fully understand why biochar does what it does, but they can measure the results. Biochar works wonders in the nutrient-poor soils of the tropics. That is because biochar has an incredible surface area. This will sound crazy, but 1 gram of high-quality biochar can have more surface area than a basketball court. This makes biochar an amazing host for all the fungi, bacteria, and the microbes that are essential for plant health. And it also has other surprising effects.
Nitrous oxide is a very powerful greenhouse gas that has on average more than 280 this time of warming potential than CO2 has over 100 years. And nitrous oxide is mostly formed from the huge amount of fertilizers that we use.
Bacteria in the soil can break down nitrate-based ammonium fertilizers into N2, which is not a greenhouse gas. But we put so much fertilizer on the land that the microbes can't process it all, and it goes into the atmosphere as the climate killer nitrous oxide. Up to 75% of the world's nitrous oxide emissions come from agricultural activities.
Several meta-studies now exist to show that on average we have a reduction of about 40% of these N2 emissions if you use biochar in soils together with the fertilizer. But in some of the production studies we did at Geisenheim University, we've seen reductions up to 80%.
Biochar looks like a very promising way of tackling many of the climate-related problems we face today, from enriching the soil and increasing yields to reducing CO2 and nitrous oxide in the atmosphere.
Most of us can't really just walk into orchards, pluck fresh fruits and eat them straight away, or catch fish and cook it right there. I mean, maybe on a camping trip, but not every day. It takes time for our food to reach from the farms to the stores and then finally our tables. And this means that most of it needs to be preserved and processed. but heavily processed food is not nutritious or healthy. But there is a traditional method of preservation that allows for a longer shelf life while ensuring that the nutrition remains intact.
There are real treasures here, concealed beneath the waters of the coast of Pamban Island in Rameshwaram. The island is located in the very south of Tamil Nadu, in the strait between India and Sri Lanka. The treasures are to be found in the corals that aren't visible from the surface. These corals help in breeding large numbers of fish. That's why Rameshwaram has such good fish resources, and the fish here tastes excellent. Everyone in the area knows Anton Thina. The businessman makes his living from fish and talks about his work on Instagram. Here, he's showcasing shore net fishing, where a group of people pulls the catch onto the beach. The technique has been passed down through generations. Anton Thina wants everyone to see where his fish come from, because he turns it into karuvadu or dry fish. I'm sure we have all seen karuvadu drying outside in the sun, but we prepare it according to traditional methods, drying it under the sand on the beach. This is an age-old method for preparing dry fish that has been slowly forgotten over the past 100 years. So we revived it to reach a large number of customers. Anton Thina buys the fish for his karuvadu fresh from the market. He says only the best quality fish is suitable. First, the fish is washed and sliced open. It's then smothered in turmeric and salt. Finally, it's wrapped in a palm mat and tied up tightly. It then gets buried in the sand on the beach, where it's left to slowly dry out. There's a preconceived notion that karuvadu is made from leftover or rotten fish. We wanted to change that so that everyone would start buying and eating karuvadu. So for the very first time, we started preparing it using fresh fish. Anton Thina's company now sells fish across India up to 2 tons each month. Prices vary from 100 to 2,000 rupees. That's the equivalent of between 1 and 22 euros a package. After preserving it, we take the buried dry fish and slice it up according to the needs of the customers, so a quarter or half kilo, 1 kilo. Then we pack it up and send it to the customer's address by courier service. Anton Thina had to work especially hard to achieve his success, as he has a disability and is unable to walk. On social media, he's very open about the challenges he's faced. His success in the company has earned him respect, even within his family, where he was often shunned in the past. We rarely used to get invited to things, but after I started the business, they all began treating us with respect, and now we get invited to all the functions. He is now turning various different types of fish into karuvadu. He has a number of employees and the business is flourishing. He also provides suitable recipe ideas for his fish on social media. Fish that was dried on the southern coast of Tamil Nadu using the same methods that were employed hundreds of years ago.
Another thing that the sea gives us is seaweed. And one such seaweed that is gaining a lot of traction lately is kelp. Turns out it's great for the soil, as animal feed, and even as food for us. But can our farmers grow this? And are our markets ready to consume it? And are we ready to eat it? Turns out there is a large group of people in Scotland that believe in a great future for this algae.
Solutions to the climate crisis will take many forms, one of which is algae. That's according to chef Callum Munro. He comes down to the coast every other day to collect seaweed here on the Scottish Isle of Skye.
Do you do this every week then?
I do it maybe twice or 3 times a week actually. We come out, yeah. See this one here, which is I would say up there with the best is sea spaghetti. As you can tell why it's called sea spaghetti, because it just looks exactly like this. Again, it's quite a subtle flavour, but you can use it just as you would spaghetti.
Together with climate activist Shona Cameron, the two are trying to bring seaweed back into the kitchen. As a renewable alternative to fish and meat, seaweed is the vegetable of the sea and is available all year round. They're sharing these ideas with schools, armed with recipes for the children to learn.
Seaweeds and bivalves were a huge part of culture here for centuries, millennia. People have eaten these species, but we've kind of lost touch with it a little bit.
Shona Cameron envisions the coast as a garden.
Somewhere that we can cultivate and use in a responsible way, and maybe how small-scale community enterprises could start to use it as a way to support their local economy.
Ian Matheson, too, wants to capitalize on the Isle of Skye seaweed by growing it. He's a trained fisherman, but for almost 2 years he's been farming seaweed as a side gig. It's more sustainable, he says. But first, he must find out which types grow best in these waters.
To begin with, we'll be using this for biostimulants, but we need to send off for testing first, see what kind of nutrients and minerals it has, and then once we've discovered that, we'll know what we want to do with it after that.
Ian Matheson and other entrepreneurs founded the farm on an area spanning 40 hectares.
We'll be putting in half the total farm area, and that should produce around 200 tonnes of kelp in the first year. And then the following year we'll put in the other half of the grid, so we'll be up to 400 tonnes.
Alongside tourism, salmon farming is one of the Isle of Skye's most important industries. It provides jobs, but aquaculture also causes environmental damage. In recent years, more and more kelp farmers have settled around the island. Some farms are already producing. The seaweed off Skye can grow to over 2 meters long, and that's completely fertilizer-free. Until now, processing has been the bottleneck, a gap in the market that Alison Baker is intent on filling. Her startup, Eco Cascade, is supported by the Scottish Government. They've just invested in a new shredding plant.
This seaweed is going to go into a research project for animal feed, but it's also, this particular variety of kelp is very good for biostimulants as a soil improver.
But so far, large-scale commercial uptake has been slower than expected.
We want to be able to process a lot of seaweed that can go onto a commercial market because that will promote the growth of the industry.
Seaweed farming is still far from replacing the salmon industry here, but residents on Skye seem open to the idea. Unlike in southern Britain, where fishers have protested the new industry, the residents of Skye are actively involved in the planning process. People just have to get used to it, rediscover it, says chef Callum Monroe.
Think about it like any other vegetable, any other thing, but it just grows in the sea. But yeah, there's a definite maybe shift in mentality that might need to happen.
The sea is truly a treasure, and seaweed farming might just go some way towards saving it.
I wouldn't mind trying some kelp in the future. But algae, biochar, dry fish, school gardens, these are all a part of the solution. But we do need more such ideas. Let us know what would you like to see more of on our show. You can email us or reach out to me directly on my social media handles. I will see you next week. Until then, take care. Goodbye. Namaskar.